We are excited about the elaboration room.
I am excited about this.
Welcome to the Elaboration Room with Reverend Yo and Reverend Harris.
This is part 2 of Feelings of Loss. The conversation is already in progress.
So I want to shift gears a little bit because I think it's important to talk about some key definitions. So because we tend to intermingle grief, bereavement, mourning. Well, there's an important distinction. So bereavement is the experience of the deprivation of a lost love by death. Grief is what we think and feel on the inside when somebody we love dies. You know, the physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms, all of that, all of the feelings that we have inside. You know, it is the psychological or behavioral response arising from bereavement. And mourning is the outward expression of our grief. And we get into trouble. We get into trouble when we don't mourn, when we put a lid on the grief, because it's going to work its way out.
Yes.
Some kind of way. It's gonna show up, right? So mourning can look like a variety of things: talking, journaling, art, music, meditation. All of those things make up mourning. And you know, earlier when we talked about that thing called complicated grief or prolonged grief, when the mourning is absent, there's a risk for the complicated or prolonged grief to follow. And, you know, that's when you need to be in a therapist or psychiatrist or psychologist office because you're not able to function. There's this thing called disenfranchised grief. And this is grief that's not socially accepted. So back in the 80s and 90s, you know, if a loved one died of AIDS, well, the survivor could have experienced disenfranchised grief. Suicide, survivors of suicide, people who commit suicide, abortion, miscarriage. Those are examples of disenfranchised grief. And it's sad, it's tragic because it's grief that's not acknowledged or supported adequately. So prolonged and complicated grief. This is a detachment disturbance featuring profound yearning for the deceased. There's a loss of meaning and identity is disrupted. The person is in distress and is crippled, basically, in adults for 12 months or more, 6 months in children. This prolonged or complicated grief was added to the DSM diagnostic manual early last year. So now it is considered to be a mental disorder. And there are two schools of thought about that, because there is no set timetable for grieving, and we all do it differently, you know, and to put a label on it, there are a lot of professionals who think it was a mistake to add it to the manual. A positive outcome is that now insurance will cover it. And then traumatic grief is, you know, the experience of having your everyday life ripped apart by an unexpected death. And it can cause people to really swirl and decline. So grief, as awful as the symptoms or responses are, it's a normal and a natural response to loss. And it's a process that helps us integrate that loss, change, and transition, and reconcile the world that we used to know to our world today. It's painful, but it's necessary, and it's not a sign of pathology. And it is different for everybody. You know, I hear people say about family members, friends, well, something's wrong with her because she's not grieving. You know, it's been 3 months and she went to Vegas and blah, blah, blah. It's not our place to judge, you know, because everybody is different.
Yes.
Everybody is different. And there's no right way to do it. And of course, we can't fix it. No timetable. And every loss is a multiple loss, more than just the loss of the physical person. I love to use the example of after my husband died, this was about a year later, I went into the garage and there was water. The water heater had died. So the garage floor was filled with water. Well, that used to be his job, right? So you take on different roles. So yeah, every loss involves a multiple loss. And we grieve old loss while grieving new loss. And you guys may have experience with this. You know, you might think you're making really good progress and in a good space with the loss of someone, and then another person you know and love, and maybe not even know too well, passes on, and it throws you back. It throws you back to prior losses. That is the nature of grief. I love this chart because, and even us, counselors, professionals, we've been taught, and most people think, that grief shrinks over time. It's so not true. It's all about perspective. What happens is we grieve our loved ones forever, but we grow around that grief, and that's the bottom row there. And, you know, we grow in a variety of ways. How we want grief to work is that line, that linear line on the left, right? And I know you ladies will appreciate it because this was me. I want to, okay, I accept where I am today. You know, my loved one is gone. I want to be done with this suffering and all these crazy feelings. So we want to get through it, but it doesn't work that way. And to your point earlier, Theresa, when you were talking about your brother,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, you make good strides, and then lo and behold, you know,
Something happens. Yes.
Something happens. That is the nature of grief. And people don't understand it. I can't tell you how many people have told me, you know, I thought I was going crazy. And I'm speaking for myself right now. You know, in 2019, after those losses, I went to a counselor and was reassured that what I was feeling was quote unquote normal, as awful as it felt. So yeah, it's tough, and it affects all of us, all parts, excuse me, of us, our physical, our emotional, our behavioral, and our spiritual. You know, when I begin to work with people individually and in groups, I have them just tell me, you know, under each column, what are you feeling? And without a doubt, there's always this light bulb, this kind of relief that, wow, okay, so I'm not going crazy. This is normal. And you guys, if you have questions or comments, feel free to jump in.
This is good. We listening.
You listening? Okay.
But no, but you know what? I am so with you. I did do counseling. My brother took his life, and I did do counseling. And the counselor told me, talk to him, tell him how you feel.
Yeah.
So this was years ago, and now I have children of my own. So I say, I get angry.
Yeah.
Because he cheated them.
Yes. Yes.
But I'm still, I'm able to function, and I have my mom. I guess it's just that brother-sister relationship, because we would fight and we would get along and love each other. So even now, I pray that he's resting in peace. But then I'll have those moments when I get angry with him as though he was alive, and we would fight as brother and sister. Yeah. And then I'll be okay.
Yes.
And then something will happen with the guys, and I'll say, they needed an uncle right now.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Because their dad just passed recently, too.
Oh, geez. How old are they?
Well, they're old. One will be 33 this year, and the other one will be 31.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're going through.
It's hard.
They're going through.
Matter. I don't even know why I asked, but I was just curious, because it's tough.
It's the proof that there is no age limit of stop of grief. It is something that will continually be with us until we go home to glory.
Yeah.
Because you will always miss that individual, or something will always remind you of that individual, or something can happen and you wish that individual was here. Because there was many times in my life that I wish that my granny was still here. And it was like up till recently, like last year, I would be like, oh, I wish she was here to experience me in this, or see me do this, or, see where I am today in my life, because I know some of the things that she instilled in me. But it would be, for me, I'd be like, oh, I wish she could see me now, and how proud she would be of, all the things I did, and all the challenges that I had to face, and still made it here today. So I have those moments.
Yeah. And so I take it to, he's an angel on their side. So I'll call, their dad, I'll call my brother, go see about, your son, go see about your nephew,
Yes.
So that helps me to get through, because I definitely believe in angels, so that's how I function.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's really good. It's healthy. And in a couple of slides, we're going to talk more about, because what we're talking about is continuing bonds with the person. That's what you guys are articulating. So yeah. Okay. So earlier on, Theresa, you mentioned, you guys may have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She's the one that identified the 5 to 7 quote unquote stages of grief that included, things like denial and anger and bargaining. That a lot of people don't understand, but she wrote that book and described those stages for patients who were in hospice, not survivors of those who have died. It's been for many years misconstrued, misunderstood. That's not what what is used today. That's not, the model for grief. There are basically, 4 categories here: the shock, the initial shock of the loss, the acute feelings of pain, the suffering part. And then, we call it survival, where there's a positive shift in energy. You're not consumed 24/7 with thoughts and feelings about the loved one. And then, ultimately, grief's power, it's still there, but the power that it's had over you is fading. I want to talk a little bit about children, okay? There have been very few significant studies of bereaved kids that have been studied and followed over time. But, there isn't a typical way because the grief reactions are influenced by the child's age, the developmental level, previous life experiences, the relationship to the deceased, culture, religious, spiritual beliefs, family, social environment, and the cause of death. And I do want to share this website because it has a lot of resources. It's a virtual library to learn more about supporting bereaved children, taxcenter.org. So how do you parent? It's really not so much what you say, but it's what you do. Things like physical affection and hugs and smiling and making eye contact, being present with them, doing activities, memorializing activities, talking about the death, openly talking and listening to them, sharing your beliefs, responding to their emotions, and expressing his or her own emotions. Some parents think that they have to hide and shut down and, show up like they're not hurting. And that's not true. I think that's a part of educating our kids and each other. They need to know, this is a painful thing. It's a part of life. So yes, and I would be remiss if I didn't say a little bit about suicide, because it is the second leading cause of death among people 15 to 24. Close to 20% of high school students report serious thoughts of suicide, and 9% have actually made an attempt to take their lives. Teenagers and young adults have had rising rates of suicide compared to 10 to 15 years ago. And the things that make them vulnerable are where they stand socially and where they stand developmentally. And, social media is not the friend of our young people.
Not at all.
No.
And
you couple that with the last bullet here, their brains haven't even finished developing. The prefrontal cortex, which is a control center, doesn't fully develop until one's mid-20s.
Wow.
So the life events that are linked to suicide risk are the following: physical abuse, sexual abuse, family violence, discrimination, natural disasters. And guess what number one is?
Wow.
It's bereavement. We've got a lot of hurting people surrounding us. We've touched on this. You guys, thank you for sharing your examples of continuing bonds, because death ends a life, but not a relationship. And an ongoing relationship with that loved one is normal. In grief, you may find a way to hold on in order to move on, which is opposite of what was originally thought. Back in the day, Sigmund Freud began this. People were thought to be mentally ill if they showed grief. You know, he believed and he taught and he wrote about the need to cut the cord, cut tail and run. We can't do that. How can you do that when you've lost a loved one? So our experts today, and it's been, you know, some years, they encourage this philosophy, this theory of continuing bonds. The goal of grief is not to get over it or recover from it or to resolve it. So I am going to share this. Can you guys see this drawing? Yeah. By a young girl whose dad died. And this is what she drew for her therapist. Her dad is in heaven. This is an image of heaven. I think it's beautifully well illustrated, and I think you'll agree after I talk you through it. But the young girl, we'll call her Sue. She's in the red dress, and she's standing behind her dad, who is sitting at a card table playing cards with his dad, her grandpa, and they're in heaven. Oh, and so this is, you know, what she sees going on. And then you see a brother and a sister of hers. Now, to the far right is her dad. And this is, remember, her vision of her dad in heaven. So her dad is sitting in his favorite chair, and you can't see it, but he's got a remote control in his hand, and he is always watching the family. So the screen at the top is the family. He's always watching that screen, eyes on the family. And you see his body is missing from the chair, but everybody else is there. So on the left, top left corner, you can't see the words there, but the little sign reads, "To real life." So whenever there's an event, a celebration, or just a need to be with her dad, he goes to real life. You know, the sign is to real life, and he goes in spirit form. And that's her way of dealing with the loss and the continuing bond, because she's at peace knowing he's watching, he's there. And if we need him, you know, he can join us in spirit form. And I just thought it was a beautiful illustration.
That is.
So the model, if you will, that the experts really celebrate, buy into today, it's called the dual process grief model. You can Google it. But basically, it demonstrates the reality of how we bounce back and forth, you know, between loss-oriented coping and restoration-oriented coping. You know, everyday life, that's us in the middle. And, you know, we do grief work and, you know, go to therapy, talk, journal, support groups, and we think about our loved one and we miss our old life. But then, you know, we have to figure out our new role on the right-hand side, the restoration-oriented. You know, we create, and you guys have gone through this, I know. You've probably created new traditions around holidays and special occasions. And, you know, it's important to do new things and have new experiences and form new relationships, adjusting to the new family roles. And then, you guys, I could go on for hours, but I know our time is limited. But I want to conclude with this chart. If you look at the vase on the right, have you heard of, it's called kintsugi art. It's a Japanese art form where they take broken vessels, broken plates, broken cups, and they restore them with this gold. and how beautiful, the pieces are. We can grow in so many different ways after loss. We can grow in our faith. We can grow wisdom, insight. We can grow in empathy. I can remember when I was a manager working in the defense industry many years ago, I was a young manager, and one of the employees, a budget analyst who worked for me, lost her son. He was hit by a car, and she was distraught. She took a leave of a couple of weeks. I think many times folks are lucky to get 3 to 5 days after losing, but she ended up quitting because she could not get it together to a point where she was able to perform her job. And I don't believe I was as empathetic as I am today because I hadn't experienced it. We can grow ministry, which is one of the things I do today. We can grow gratitude. Gratitude, if there is a magic pill, I tell you, for many of us, it's gratitude and just being thankful for what we do have.
Yes.
And we can grow in endurance. So with that, I truly, truly thank you, ladies, for having me share a little bit about this topic. I'm going to stop sharing my slide here. Okay. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be here. Do you have any questions, any comments?
Go ahead, Reverend.
I just want to thank you because the presentation was phenomenal. It really, it made me think of the things that I have gone through and family members are still going through. And one of our classmates, for Yolanda and I, his wife had passed, and we were talking on the phone, and someone told him, "You should be moving on now." And I told him, no.
Oh my God, that's the worst thing.
No one can tell you how long,
No.
and he has since passed. But it's just, we don't know who's hurting. Every smiling face is not okay.
That is
we
true.
have to be more compassionate about this. And
That's right.
in the realm of grieving, that's the place. And as you were talking about the children, I taught school. I taught the little ones for so many years. And we don't give the children the credit of their knowing. You think they don't know, and you think they can't understand, but they can.
Yes.
If you talk to them. That's what would happen. A parent would come to me and say something about little Johnny, and I would look at the parent and I look at Johnny and I say, "Johnny, what happened to you?" And he could explain it explicitly. But we think we have to shelter them, and we are so far past shelter children now.
Yes.
And we have to give them that.
Such a great point.
It is.
So do I say my spiel, or you have something to say, Reverend Yo?
You could say your spiel, and I'm going to spill us the rest of the way.
So we thank you, Miss Cindy. We thank you.
Do.
Thank you for your presentation. Miss Cindy is the expert.
Yes.
We are not doctors. We are not here to give you medical advice. We just want to give you something else to consider. And we pray that this presentation definitely gives you such a wealth to consider.
Yes. So, Miss Cindy, as Reverend Theresa said, we thank you for joining us this evening in the elaboration room with two sisters of one. We thank you for spending time with us. We thank you for your expertise in this matter. And we definitely thank you for sharing your story, because then when people hear a little bit of your story and then they understand why you took the leap to go ahead now so you can help others, that's just phenomenal. And we thank you for doing that. So we thank you for all that you did. We thank you for everything that you've spoken. For all of you watching, if you want to reach out to Miss Cindy, if you didn't screenshot the end of the video, I will put her information down in the link, so you will have her email if you want to reach out to her regarding her grief classes, regarding her grief workshops, because maybe you heard something today that made you feel some type of way, and maybe you need a little more help. So Miss Cindy, we're going to put your information down below. So when this, when they contact you, just do what you do, because I work with Miss Cindy, so I trust her leadership and guidance on this. So is there anything you would like to say before I close us out?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to help educate your audience. Yeah.
You are welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, like we said, thank you for joining us today in the elaboration room with two sisters of one. And as we always end, we want you to be brave, be strong, and be different. Ask and it will be given unto you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Believe in yourself and encourage yourself. But in all things, remember, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Peace and blessings, our brothers and sisters. Until next week in the elaboration room with two sisters of one, have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Elaboration Room with two sisters of one. Make sure you like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next episode every Monday at 6 p.m.